Okay, so in this video, we are going to go over the concept of Soulstones. This is a very important concept in Malifaux. It's a very unique concept in Malifaux, and it's one that new players will often neglect, but it's, again, like I said, it's very important. So we're going to cover that concept today. So the first thing to point out with Soulstones is the idea that encounters and encounter sizes are determined by Soulstone. A standard game of Malifaux is 50 Soulstones, and typically, where masters are involved, the cost of your master and associated totems do not factor into this cost. So you don't have to pay Soulstones for your master or its associated totems. You do have to pay Soulstones for crew hires, including secondary masters, including minions, henchmen, enforcers, that sort of thing. You do have to pay for Soulstones. Now, it's an important thing, though, to note that your points, or in this game, Soulstones, are never going to waste, because any Soulstones that you have left over after hiring your crew become Soulstones that end up in your cache. A lot of times people denote that with little markers or little stones just to let them know. And these are important because these Soulstones are actually used in-game. And this is the part that I think a lot of new players miss out on, is the proper use of their Soulstones during the encounter, in addition to the decision-making of how much Soulstones to keep when hiring their crew. And this is because there are some masters that really require a lot of Soulstones. For example, this master here, Colette Dubois, she in general requires more Soulstones than your typical Malifaux master. So it's a good idea to save several Soulstones for her. I like to save between 6 and 10 Soulstones, 10 being the maximum you can have for a crew. But that's how many Soulstones I like to use during an encounter. And I'll even bring in, a Soulstone miner to help generate more Soulstones during the encounter. So pay attention to your master and what type of play they have. And we can get into the specifics of why Colette at some point, why she likes to use a lot of Soulstones. So in general, there are three entities of that can use Soulstones in a game of Malifaux. First off is your master. So your master can use Soulstones. This is a very important concept, and it's one that most people remember. Henchmen can also use Soulstones. It's very important to remember that henchmen can use Soulstones. And then finally, you can use Soulstones. You use Soulstones in managing your crew, not only hiring them, but I'll show you in a minute here what you can do. In addition, there are certain upgrades, like there's upgrades where you can attach to where even minions or enforcers can use Soulstones, but that's the exception more than the rule. Good thing to remember is masters, henchmen, and you can use Soulstones. Okay, so let's talk about how you can use Soulstones before we get into how your crew can use Soulstones. So I guess this is your crew using Soulstones, but there's no physical model electing to use the Soulstones. But the main way you use Soulstones outside of a model declaring the use of a Soulstone is typically at the beginning of a turn, where you have a control hand, right? So let's say control hand is 6, 4. Yeah, this is a great control hand. This is a terrible example. But let's say, wow, that's a great hand. Man, I need to just deal out a hand on camera like I'm going to explain something and then go play a game. But anyway, let's say, for example, you deal out a control hand to yourself. Let's try a different one, because that was terrible. 3, 4, 5, 6. We need a bad control hand. this one's worse. This one's not as good. It's still okay. Look at that. I mean, if you have a 6 or above, okay, I'm getting besides the point. But let's say you have a control hand and you don't like your control hand, or you're not seeing any high cards or anything like that. Wow. This is funny. How many good control hands? Here we go. This is some snout control hand here. But let's say I got this control hand, and things are not looking good for me. What I can do is I can spend a soul stone, and that's going to allow me to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. So I could say, okay, I'm going to cycle my hand a little bit, so I'm going to draw 2 cards, and I'm going to discard, let's say, discard these the 2 lower cards that I don't want, right? So that's how I can use soul stones, and this is important to remember too, because when turns get crucial, you need something really important to happen, and you end up with a hand that looks like a foot. That's what you're going to want to do. Now, the main way your models will use soul stones is in dueling, healing, dueling, damage mitigation, and damage reduction. Okay, so in a battle with soulstone users, this is where things can be very powerful. So in this example here, we're going to have Ramos performing an attack against Colette. And for the purposes of this instance, I'm not using any specific attack. I'm just going to kind of make this up. This is like a ranged attack, 2, 3, 4 damage. Nothing special here. Now, in general, Colette has a rule, Serene Countenance, that would cause Ramos to be at a negative for this flip. In other words, he would have to flip 2 cards and take the lower card. But what you can do with a Soulstone user is you can spend a Soulstone to give yourself a positive modifier on your flip. So you can do a plus flip. In this case, this positive modifier is just going to change the flip from a negative to a neutral flip, or a single card flip that can be cheated. Okay, so let's go ahead and perform this duel. So Ramos is casting with a stat 6, and he gets a 16. Colette's going to flip, and she's going to have a defense of 5 book plus a 3, so she's at 8. So it's 16 to 8. And let's say Colette cannot cheat at this point. One thing Colette can do is she can spend a soul stone to induce a negative on this damage flip, because Ramos is at a neutral flip that's cheatable. She doesn't want him to be able to cheat, so she's going to spend a soul stone to attach a negative twist to the duel. So Ramos is now going to flip 2 cards. So he's going to flip weak and moderate. He cannot choose the moderate, and he cannot cheat the damage. So in this instance, Colette is going to be taking 2 damage from this attack. Now, let's say this is her last 2 health. She doesn't want to die, and for whatever reason, she can't declare her defensive trigger. The last thing a defender with a Soulstone use can do is they can spend that Soulstone to now mitigate the damage coming in. So this becomes a I believe this is a 1, 2, 3. So weak will mitigate 1 damage, moderate will mitigate 2, and severe will mitigate 3 damage. So she's going to spend her last soul stone to mitigate damage here, incoming damage, and she's going to mitigate weak damage here. So she'll mitigate 1 damage from this attack and net 1 damage. So you can see how the careful use of Soulstones can keep your Soulstone users alive, and you can also, the careful use of Soulstones can get around things like Serene Countenance, Manipulative, and that sort of thing. The other use of Soulstones is, in addition to giving positives on the flips, is you can give yourself a suit. So if Ramos or whatever really wanted his trigger, he could spend the soul stone to give himself a book, for example, on his flip, and he can So he would now be at 9 mask book to whatever his stat was. This is important for declaring triggers, and it's important to note too that there are going to be some instances where an ability requires a suit but has maybe a different suit or multiples on its trigger. Okay, so for example, when we're talking Colette here, she has an ability called Presto Changeo, and you can see the target number of Presto Changeo includes a mask. So it's 13 mask. So normally, if she's not going to be cheating a mask in casting this, she's going to be spending soul stones to get the mask. But the interesting thing is, she can flip, say, a book as part of this. I can't find a book off here. Here we go. So she could have declared a soul stone to gain the mask, and she could either flip or cheat in a book, and that gives her the trigger as well. So she could now declare the trigger. She has, in this case, it would be 11 plus 6 or 17 book mask because of the soul stone, and that's going to give her the ability plus the trigger. So this is a very important concept to understand: when to use soul stones, how to use soul stones. It's a very important concept to the game, and it's going to keep your masters, henchmen, and soul stone users in good shape as they approach duels.